The man stood in the shelter holding the puppy, and the room seemed to blur around him. Sounds of barking and voices in the background faded as if the world had gone silent except for the tiny heartbeat pressed against his chest. The puppy looked up at him, its small ears twitching, eyes locked on his face like it was memorizing every feature as though it had known him for years and had been waiting for this exact moment to see him again. He felt his hands trembling, slightly unsure why this encounter stirred something deep inside him. He carried the puppy to a quiet corner of the shelter where there was a small bench and sat down holding the small body close. The warmth of the puppy spread into him, melting something that had been frozen for too long. His breathing slowed and his shoulders relaxed for the first time in weeks, maybe months. He could not remember the last time he had felt calm like this. He whispered softly, saying, "You know me, don't you?" The puppy responded with a soft whine, pressing its head under his chin as if answering yes. Without words, the shelter worker approached holding a clipboard, asking if he wanted to learn more about the puppy. She explained it had been found near a construction site, dirty, hungry, and frightened, but otherwise healthy. The vet estimated it was just a few months old, still so young, yet already alone in the world. Hearing that made his chest tighten. He gently stroked the puppy's head, feeling its small body relax against him. He thought about how cruel it must have been to be abandoned or lost at such a young age. He asked the worker if anyone had come looking for the puppy. She shook her head and said no one had called or reported a missing dog, matching its description. For days the puppy had sat quietly in the cage, not barking, not whining, almost as if it had been waiting for someone in particular, and now with him it seemed full of life, wagging its tail every few seconds, looking up at him like it had finally found what it had been waiting for. That made something twist in his chest, an ache he could not fully describe. He thought about taking the puppy home just for the night, maybe as a foster until a permanent family came along, yet deep inside he knew the thought of letting go again made him feel uneasy, as if losing something important all over again. He had no logical reason for feeling this way. He had not planned to adopt any animal, yet something about this connection felt undeniable, like destiny. He rubbed the puppy's ears softly and whispered, "You look like you know me. Why does it feel like I know you?" The puppy wagged its tail harder when hearing his voice, licking his hand, as though confirming some bond that neither of them could explain. His eyes burned slightly, and he quickly blinked away the tears, embarrassed to show emotion in front of strangers. The worker smiled softly, saying, "Dogs have a way of choosing their people. Maybe you were meant to come here today. Maybe this one was waiting just for you." He looked down at the puppy, now resting its head on his arm, and for a moment he forgot about everything else, the bills, the stress, the loneliness. It was as if holding this small life pushed away every dark thought that had weighed on him lately. He hugged it a little closer, whispering softly, "You feel like home, little one," and the puppy sighed happily, curling up against him, safe and warm, as if it had finally come home too. The man carried the small German Shepherd puppy to the front desk where the shelter worker prepared some paperwork. She asked if he was interested in fostering or adopting, and he hesitated, unsure what to say. His eyes glanced down at the puppy, which clung to him as if afraid to let go, and something deep inside told him he could not leave this tiny creature behind. The worker smiled warmly, saying it seemed like the puppy had already chosen him, and all he had to do was sign a few forms. He filled out the documents with slightly shaky hands, not because he was unsure about the choice, but because of the weight he felt from the moment he had locked eyes with this puppy. The connection was strong, unexplainable, yet real. As he wrote his name, the puppy looked up at him from his lap, tail wagging as if it understood something important was happening. He paused for a second, noticing how his name looked on the paper. It felt like committing to something bigger than himself. Once the paperwork was complete, the worker explained how to care for the puppy, the vaccinations needed, the food schedule, and how to help it adjust to a new home. He listened carefully, nodding, though part of his mind was somewhere else, thinking about why this felt so familiar, as if he had done it before with the same puppy or one just like it. He thought maybe it was only because German Shepherds were common and familiar, but deep down he felt it was more than that. On the drive home, the puppy sat quietly on the passenger seat, looking at him with those deep brown eyes. It did not bark or whine, only stared, almost studying him, and every time he glanced at it he felt his heart squeeze with a strange mix of sadness and warmth. He tried to shake off the feeling, telling himself it was just because puppies are adorable and naturally create bonds quickly, but this was different. This felt like a reunion rather than a first meeting. When he arrived home, he placed the puppy gently on the floor, letting it explore the small apartment. It sniffed every corner, every piece of furniture, then returned to sit near his feet, looking up as if to say, "Yes, this will do." He smiled without realizing it, a real smile he had not worn for a long time, and reached down to pat the puppy's head. He whispered, "Welcome home, little one." The puppy barked once and wagged its tail furiously before curling up next to him as if it had already claimed this place as home. As evening approached, he prepared a small meal for the puppy, using some leftover meat and rice until he could buy proper dog food. He placed the bowl down and watched as the puppy ate eagerly, yet still looked up between bites to make sure he was there nearby, watching, protecting its presence. filled the small apartment with life, a sound and warmth that had been missing for months, maybe longer. When it finished eating, it trotted back to him, climbed clumsily onto his lap, and fell asleep, curled into a tiny ball. He sat there motionless, feeling the weight of the sleeping puppy, and thought about how strange the day had been. He had not planned to come to the shelter, he had not planned to bring a dog home, yet here it was sleeping peacefully in his lap, as if it had always belonged there, and he could not shake the feeling that he had been meant to find it, or perhaps it had been meant to find him all along, fate or something like it had led him here, and now he felt something inside him healing. The man woke up early the next morning to the sound of tiny paws scratching softly against the edge of the bed. The puppy had climbed up halfway and was now trying to reach him, its tail wagging furiously. He scooped it up and smiled at how easily it had settled into his home and into his life. He placed it on the bed, and the puppy immediately curled beside him, resting its head on his chest, as if it had always been there. He rubbed its small ears and whispered, "Good morning, Rex." The name came out naturally without thought, and it froze him for a moment. He stared at the puppy, wondering why he had said that name. It felt familiar, heavy with meaning, like it had belonged to someone he once knew. The puppy looked up at him, tilting its head slightly, then licked his chin as if accepting the name without question. He shook his head, dismissing it as a random choice, but inside he felt a strange ache, like a memory lingering just out of reach. After breakfast, he decided to take the puppy outside for a walk. It trotted proudly beside him on a borrowed leash from the shelter, sniffing every flower and corner like it already knew the neighborhood. Every now and then it would glance back at him, its eyes soft and warm, like it was making sure he was still there, watching, protecting. He noticed how naturally they moved together, as if they had done this hundreds of times before. A neighbor sitting on her porch waved and called out, saying she had not seen him smile like that in months. She asked about the puppy, and when he mentioned the shelter, her expression shifted slightly. She stepped closer and looked at the puppy more carefully, then at him, and said quietly, "You had a dog before, didn't you?" He frowned, shaking his head, saying not that he could remember. She looked surprised, saying she could have sworn she remembered seeing him with a German shepherd not long ago. Maybe it was this one, or one that looked exactly like it. He laughed nervously, brushing it off as mistaken identity, but her words planted a thought that would not go away. On the way back to his apartment, he studied the puppy again, the way it walked, the way it stared at him, like it knew every step he would take before he even made it. Something about that was familiar, unsettling even, yet comforting at the same time. Back home, the puppy ran straight to the small corner near the couch and scratched at the edge of a cabinet, as if it knew something was there. He opened the cabinet, curious, and inside was an old leash, dusty and worn, and on it hung a name tag, faded but still legible. The letters spelled out Rex. He froze, staring at the tag, his mind spinning. How had that leash ended up in his apartment? He could not remember buying it. He could not even remember owning a dog at all. The puppy wagged its tail and barked softly, as if urging him to remember. He sat down heavily on the couch, clutching the leash in one hand and looking at the puppy in disbelief. A flicker of something flashed through his mind. A yard, a sunny day, a dog running to him, a familiar laugh, his own voice calling out, "Rex, come here," and the same puppy, or one just like it, leaping into his arms. He gasped as the image faded, leaving behind confusion and an ache in his chest. He reached for the puppy, pulling it into his lap, whispering softly, "Is it you? Did we know each other before?" The puppy licked his hand and rested its head on his arm with a soft sigh, and in that quiet moment he felt certain deep down that this was not just chance, this was something lost, being returned to him, even if he could not yet explain how or why. The man sat in silence for a long time, holding the old leash in one hand and the puppy curled in his lap. Every detail of that faded memory nagged at him. He could see flashes of a house with a small yard, a wooden fence, and a dog almost identical to this one running toward him, full of joy. He could hear laughter and feel the warmth of sunlight on his face, but when he tried to hold on to the image, it slipped away, leaving him empty and frustrated. He rubbed his temples, trying to focus, but it was like chasing smoke. The puppy seemed to sense his unease. It licked his hand softly and rested its head on his arm, as if to comfort him. He smiled weakly, patting its back and whispering, "Thank you, buddy." He stared at the faded name tag again. Rex, the name felt so familiar, so personal, like it belonged to him somehow. Maybe this was not the first time he had said that name. Maybe it had been part of his life before, but if that was true, then why could he not remember anything clearly? He decided to dig through some old boxes stored in the closet, hoping to find something that might explain the leash or the name. Inside one box he found old bills, clothes, and random household items, but nothing about a dog. Then at the bottom of another box he found a small photo album covered in dust. He opened it carefully and flipped through the pages. Most of the pictures were ordinary moments, birthdays, a road trip, a few old friends, but then he froze. One photograph showed him kneeling next to a young German shepherd with the name Rex printed on its collar. His breath caught in his throat and his hands trembled as he traced the image with his fingers. The date on the back was from over a year ago, and suddenly he remembered the night Everything changed. A loud crash, the sound of metal twisting and glass shattering, the sickening silence that followed, and then waking up in a hospital with a bandaged head and strangers telling him he had been in an accident he had never questioned what he might have lost besides time and memory. Until now he looked at the puppy, which was now sitting at his feet watching him quietly, and a wave of emotion hit him hard. This was Rex. This had to be the same dog, maybe a little smaller from malnutrition. Maybe scared from being alone, but the eyes were the same, that deep brown gaze that looked at him with absolute trust and love. He felt tears prick his eyes as he whispered, "I lost you, didn't I?" And the puppy responded with a soft whine, placing its paw gently on his leg as if to say, "Yes, but I found you again." The realization left him both relieved and heartbroken, relieved that Rex was alive and somehow had found his way back to him, heartbroken that he had forgotten his best friend for so long. He reached down, scooping up Rex and hugging him tightly. The puppy wagged its tail and licked his cheek, forgiving him in an instant as if the separation had never happened. He sat back on the couch holding Rex close and made a silent promise to never let go again. He would take care of him, protect him, and make up for every day they had been apart, because fate had given them a second chance, and he would not waste it. He whispered softly, "We are home now, Rex," and the puppy rested its head against his chest, eyes closing as though it too finally felt at peace. The man woke the next morning with Rex curled against his side, warm and safe as if he had never left. Rex stretched his tiny legs, yawning, and then climbed up to lick his face, wagging his tail with uncontainable joy. It felt so natural to wake up like this, as though they had been doing it every day for years. He rubbed Rex's head, whispering, "Good morning, buddy," and for the first time in so long, he felt like he had a reason to get up and face the day. He made breakfast while Rex explored the apartment, sniffing every corner and pausing at the window to bark softly at a passing bird. The sound made the man laugh, surprising even himself. He could not remember the last time he had laughed like that, maybe before the accident, when life was simpler, when he had not been carrying a blank space where memories used to be. He fed Rex a small bowl of kibble he had bought the night before, then sat down with his coffee, watching as Rex ate happily, tail wagging like a small flag of gratitude. Later that day he decided to take Rex on a longer walk through the neighborhood, maybe hoping it might spark more memories, or at least help him feel connected to something again. As they walked, people noticed them. One older man at the corner grocery store waved and said, "I see you found your dog again." The man froze, asking what he meant, and the shopkeeper said he used to see him walking a German Shepherd every morning before the accident. The man tried to explain he had lost his memory, but the shopkeeper only smiled and said, "Well, looks like he never forgot you." Those words hit hard and stayed with him. As they continued their walk, they passed the park, and Rex suddenly pulled hard on the leash, running toward a small field. He let him go, curious to see what would happen. Rex dashed to a particular tree, sniffing excitedly, circling it before barking once and sitting down. The man approached slowly, feeling something stir inside his chest. He could see flashes of himself sitting under that same tree with Rex beside him, a book in one hand and coffee in the other. Peaceful moments he had not known were missing until now. He knelt down, stroking Rex's back, whispering, "You waited for me, didn't you?" And Rex responded by resting his head on his knee, eyes closing in absolute trust. It was overwhelming, the loyalty, the patience, the unspoken forgiveness. In that one simple act he felt tears again, but he let them fall this time, letting the emotions wash over him like a tide he had been holding back too long. Back at the apartment he dug deeper into the boxes of old belongings, determined to piece together what life had been like before the accident. He found more photos of him and Rex at the park, on hiking trails, even at a beach. One picture showed Rex as a small puppy the day he had adopted him from the same shelter, ironically enough, and he realized this was not just some coincidence. Fate had truly given him back what he had lost that night. Rex curled at the foot of the bed before eventually moving closer, laying his head on the man's arm as though afraid he might disappear again. He whispered, "I am not going anywhere, buddy," and for the first time in a long time he felt whole, like a missing part of himself had returned and anchored him back to life. The next morning the man woke up feeling lighter, as though some heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Rex was already awake, sitting near the bed, wagging his tail impatiently and holding his leash in his mouth like he was reminding him of their new routine. He smiled at the sight, took the leash, and said, "All right, buddy, let's go." The puppy barked once in approval, and together they headed outside. The sun was soft and warm, and for a moment he simply stood there watching Rex sniff the grass and trot happily down the sidewalk, feeling grateful for this second chance at life. As they walked through the neighborhood, more people began to recognize him. Some waved and others came closer, asking about Rex. One woman jogging stopped and said, "I thought he was gone after the accident. I am glad you found him again." He felt awkward explaining his memory loss, but she only smiled and said, "Sometimes they remember for us." Rex nudged his leg, almost like he understood, and the man felt his throat tighten. He had been so lost after the accident, drowning in confusion and loneliness, yet this little dog had found his way back, like a piece of his soul returning home. When they returned to the apartment, Rex ran straight to the couch and sat proudly on it like he had claimed it as his own. The man laughed and sat beside him, gently scratching his ears. He thought about how easily Rex had adapted, how quickly he himself had adjusted to having him back, and yet deep down there was still guilt for forgetting him, for letting so much time slip by while Rex was out there alone. He whispered softly, "I am so sorry, buddy. I should have remembered sooner." Rex only licked his hand and wagged his tail as though forgiveness had already been given. Later that day he decided to visit the shelter again to thank the workers for taking care of Rex while he had been lost. They welcomed him warmly and were thrilled to see Rex looking happy and healthy. One worker said, "We knew there was something special when we saw how he reacted to you dogs. Remember who loves them even when we don't?" He nodded, fighting back the emotion in his chest, then asked about the day Rex had been found. They explained he had been wandering along a busy road, tired, hungry, and with a torn collar still hanging from his neck, likely searching for something or someone. Hearing that made his chest ache, thinking of Rex alone and scared, yet still holding on long enough for fate to bring them together again. He reached down, scratching Rex behind the ears, and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me, buddy." The puppy barked softly and leaned into his touch. They drove home quietly, the man's mind spinning with thoughts about how much he had almost lost and how grateful he was for this second chance. That evening he cooked a proper meal for himself and prepared a hearty dinner for Rex. After they both ate, Rex jumped onto the couch, curling up next to him with his head resting on his lap as though he belonged there and always had. The man stroked his fur and whispered, "I will not lose you again, I promise." The puppy sighed contentedly, drifting to sleep, safe and loved for the first time in months, and the man sat there in silence, thinking how sometimes life takes everything from you only to give back exactly what you need when you least expect it. The man woke the next morning to the feeling of Rex pawing gently at his arm, eager to start the day. He smiled, stretching as he whispered, "Good morning, buddy." Rex barked softly, tail wagging, and dashed toward the door, leash in his mouth like he had learned their routine perfectly. They went for their walk, passing by familiar spots, and each step seemed to bring another faint memory back to him. Small flashes of laughter, of running alongside Rex and feeling that same sense of freedom that had once been lost. He realized this little dog was not only returning to him physically but also guiding him back to himself. They stopped at the park, where a few people recognized Rex again. One elderly man feeding pigeons said, "I used to see you too here all the time. Glad to see you back." The man thanked him, smiling, yet feeling a strange pull in his chest, wondering how much of his old life had been erased from his memory and how many people had quietly noticed his absence after the accident. He knelt to pet Rex, whispering, "I guess you never stopped waiting, huh?" Rex licked his cheek and barked once in response, almost like he understood. Later that afternoon he decided to visit the old part of town where he had lived before the accident, maybe to see if anything else could bring back what he had lost. Rex trotted ahead, tail high, leading him directly to a small house with a fenced yard. His steps slowed as he stared at it, memories sparking like tiny flames in the back of his mind. He could see himself standing in that yard, calling for Rex as a younger version of the same puppy raced toward him, ears flopping, tongue out, and eyes bright with joy. His breath caught as he whispered, "This was our home, wasn't it?" He sat on the curb across from the house, Rex sitting beside him, leaning against his leg as if offering silent support. A woman came out of the house and recognized him immediately. She said, "You lived here before the accident, right? You and your dog were always out playing fetch in the yard?" He nodded, slowly explaining he had lost parts of his memory. She smiled gently, saying, "Well, it looks like at least one of you remembered how to get home." Rex barked at the sound of her voice, wagging his tail furiously, and she laughed, saying, "He sure has not changed." The man felt an ache deep in his chest, realizing how much had been taken by that single accident, not just time, but parts of his identity. Yet here was Rex somehow managing to bridge that gap as if nothing had happened, bringing the past and present together into one moment of healing. He picked up Rex, hugging him tight, whispering, "Thank you for finding me when I could not even find myself." That evening, as the sun set, he and Rex sat on the couch in silence, watching the sky change colors. He ran his hand over Rex's soft fur, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath, and thought about how easily life could have been different, how Rex might never have found him, how he might have gone on forever without remembering the bond they had shared. The idea made him shiver, and he whispered softly, "We got another chance, buddy. Let's not waste it." Rex wagged his tail in answer, curling closer and resting his head on the man's lap, eyes closing in peace, as if to say he agreed completely. The days turned into weeks, and the bond between the man and Rex grew stronger with every passing moment. The man had once lived in quiet loneliness, unsure of who he was and disconnected from the life he used to have, but Rex had changed that completely. He brought laughter back into the apartment, filled the mornings with eager paws tapping on the floor, and gave the man a reason to get up and keep moving forward even when the memories still came in pieces. One evening the man sat on the couch with a box of old photographs spread across the coffee table. He had been going through them slowly, trying to rebuild his life one memory at a time. Rex sat next to him, resting his head on the man's knee, watching quietly as if he understood the importance Of these moments, in one photograph he saw himself smiling holding Rex as a tiny puppy just days after adopting him from the same shelter. He whispered softly, "You really have been with me from the start, haven't you?" Rex wagged his tail and licked his hand, as if confirming it. The man thought about how life had taken him from that joyful day to the accident that had stolen everything, and how in spite of it all Rex had survived alone and somehow managed to find his way back to him. Fate had given them a second chance, and he intended to protect it with everything he had. He picked up Rex, holding him close, and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me, buddy. I will never leave you again." Rex nuzzled against his chest, sighing softly in comfort. Over the next few weeks he built new routines with Rex: morning walks, evening play sessions, trips to the park where more and more people began to recognize them together again. Strangers and neighbors alike smiled, saying how good it was to see the two reunited and whole. Every comment warmed him because it reminded him that what he had with Rex was real, something unbreakable. No accident could erase that. One day he visited the shelter again to show the staff how well Rex was doing. They were thrilled seeing how healthy and happy the puppy had become. One worker said, "I knew from the moment he saw you that he remembered something people sometimes forget, but dogs never do. They love with their whole hearts." The man smiled and replied, "He reminded me of who I was and who I still am." As he said that, he realized it was true. Rex had not just given him companionship, he had given him back his life. That night, as he sat on the couch with Rex sleeping soundly in his lap, he reflected on how far they had come from that first moment at the shelter when Rex had recognized him before he even remembered himself. He thought about the accident, the months of feeling lost and empty, and the incredible way fate had brought them back together. It was heartbreaking to think of the time lost, but comforting to know they had found each other again. He whispered softly, "You are home now, and I am home too." Rex wagged his tail in his sleep as if hearing the words and agreeing. The man smiled, resting his head back and closing his eyes with a peaceful heart. For the first time in a very long time he felt whole, like no piece of him was missing anymore, because Rex had filled the void with love, loyalty, and forgiveness, a bond unbroken by time or tragedy.